And just like that, this everlasting project of me restoring this old Land Rover is finally coming to an end. Because right now this is all done and ready to go back on the road. After spending more than 500 active hours working on the car and a pretty big chunk of my savings. But all of this is actually a lie. I feel like I'm finally at the finish line of the project now, and whilst going through this list I realized I haven't checked off everything, so we might as well go through that together from the start to the very end. Starting off with the door tops, which actually has been replaced at some point in the past, but they're now fully refurbished, new paint, new sliding channels, resealed but with the original glass windows. And next is the lower half of the doors, which are actually on the car now. It's the original frame of the doors with a new aluminium skin, new door locks, hinges and mirrors, but the original galvanized capping. Following that, we have the hood of the car that's actually hanging up on the wall here. So this is fully original, sandblasted as is, with the original rivets on the outside. It has the original hood mount for the spare, but I'm going to have the spare at the back. Otherwise, it's all original but fully refurbished. And then we have the windshield, which is fully original. Only thing I've done is reseal the glass and refurbish all of the fixings for that. We then have the wheels, which are steel rims from a Discovery 1. They've been painted in the same limestone white as the roof. And I also achieved to find a fifth one because the car only came with 4 when I picked it up. The 3 next ones are standing on the shelf over there, starting with the radiator housing, which has been fully repaired with a new replacement piece welded to the bottom because that was rotting away. And I also replaced the radiator because it's been standing parked for 10 years, so I didn't really know the condition of the internals of that. And lastly, the fuel tank, which I've also replaced with a new one because of the same reason, just standing still for 10 years. We then have the front axle, which has been fully refurbished with mostly new parts, apart from some old stuff which was within spec. New swivel housings, everything's been resealed and painted black once again. And the same goes for the rear axle, but that actually had a hole through the diff pan cover, so that's been welded on and replaced with a replacement piece. Next is the left hand and right hand wing, which has been sanded down to bare aluminium. This one actually also got a new old stock replacement piece for the inner wing because I found one close by, or 7 hours away. I'm keeping the old checker plates because they're dull and looks nice with the galvanized cappings. Repainted, not perfect, some dents and stuff, but overall matching the car. Next is the exhaust, which has been replaced at some point as well. So that's sandblasted and repainted in silver because it just looks clean for a couple of weeks at least. And following that, we have the cast iron headers, which are the original ones, just painted matte black because they will also rust once again. And I also have the distributor written down here, but I will replace the original one with a electronic distribution system, especially now that I broke the cap on that one. Then I've written down track rods, but that includes the solid rods, the steering rods, linking arms and everything. And all of them has been grinded down to bare metal, repainted, and obviously replaced all of the ball joints at the ends of those. And then second to last on this column is the floor plates up front, which is just plates for the floor. And then finally the rear door, which is the original door frame with a new skin. I've repainted both of those separately with epoxy primer and then connected them together with a sealant between and then painted them to give full protection between the different metals. New door latches at the back, new door handles, and original window with new sealant. And that means I can fully mark out door tops, bottom part of the doors, hood, windshield, wheels, radiator housing, radiator, fuel tank, front axle, rear axle, right wing, left wing, exhaust, headers, distributor, track rods, engine top and bottom, I will get back to that, gearbox, transfer case, overdrive, floor plates, and rear door. So apart from this, everything here is done. On the top of this column, I'm starting with the Safari roof, Alpine windows, Safari sliding windows, and rear quarters. And all of those has been resealed with new seals and sliding channels, but otherwise kept as is because they are the original limestone white as the two-tone color body has. And it's also the original paint of the car, so I just left the patina on that to emphasize it's an old car. I'm not going to replace the lower dashboard because it doesn't work with the heating setup I'm going to use, so I'll leave that untouched. But the upper dash has been grinded down to bare metal, repainted, everything has been put back together with the air flaps at the front of the bulkhead, which also has been fully restored but are the original ones. I've written down ignition key, but by that I mean the whole ignition barrel with the key, because I didn't have that and everything was drilled out. But by mistake, I've ordered a diesel version. So I'm not sure if I can use that. If I can, great. If not, I need to replace that. And then I've written down wire loom, but I'm going to replace that with a brand new fully built loom for the car. Headlights, I have new ones. Side lights, new ones. Indicators, new ones. Brake lights, new ones. Front bumper, it's been replaced at some point. Grille, sandblasted and repainted. Expansion tank, that's together with the radiator. That's just cleaned up with a repainted bracket. Then it's the mud guards. That's not the mud flaps, it's the mud guards inside of the front wings. Grinded down, bare metal, repainted, sprayed with gravel guard. This is rubber texture paint. Side sills, I've replaced the skin of the sill, but also the metal railing within, which is galvanized and with new stainless bolts. And at last, I think I can just rush through the last column because it's the front prop shaft, rebuilt, rear prop shaft, rebuilt, gearbox tunnel, repainted, heater, I'm going to replace this. Same goes for the auxiliary heater, which is in the makings. Battery replaced, handbrake rebuilt, front brakes replaced fully, rear brakes replaced fully, brake lines all new, clutch all new, carb rebuilt, interior painted, steering box rebuilt, steering wheel sanded down, glued, some cracks and then repainted with epoxy and black gloss paint. Brake booster, decided not to use that and just have the original non-boosted system, which is debatable, but I'm keeping the car completely stock to begin with. Starter rebuilt with new brushes. Oil bath filter housing, I need to buy that. Oil filter housing for the engine. Restored. Front leaves for the suspension, obviously. Replaced. Rear leaves replaced. Front shocks replaced. Rear shocks replaced. Alternator, I haven't done anything because it's in good condition. Fuel pump, I haven't done anything with that. Spare carrier at the back, currently with a oversized tire, so it doesn't really fit, so it's just a temporary setup. I'm going to have a smaller tire, same size of all of these, so I can rotate on 5 wheels whilst traveling. And then I've written down leaf bottom plates, and that's because I was missing 2. I have picked up some old one of those and all 4 has been restored. Swivels replaced. And last on the list, I've written down everything else. And it's kind of wild to think about how this actually looked like when I picked the car up and started this restoration, because from afar it didn't look too bad, and that's the reason why I thought I would be able to take the car apart, paint some stuff and replace a bunch of bearings and gaskets and put the car back together and hit the road. But when I started to take things apart, it was obvious that this was not going to be a quick restoration, and the car was in far worse condition than what I first thought. And therefore I had to make up my mind whether or not I should continue with this project or abandon ship and find a better platform to start with. because if I was going to make this car into my new travel rig, I would have to spend a lot more time and money than what I first planned to do. But if I decided to do so, I would end up with the car in way better shape than if I just did the light restoration that I first planned. And I obviously decided to fully restore this 50-year-old car, and it's very much likely to last another 50 based on the effort put into this. But apart from that list, there's a lot of things I just kept in the back of my mind, so there's a lot more to this build than what that list contains. For example, something as simple as the position of the license plate, because this is a 74 model from the UK. So the license plate is supposed to fit within this hinge and within the line of this galvanized capping. And the modern license plates in Norway are about this wide. And the entire width of the car has this bracket within here holding the rear top of the car down on the chassis. And that was completely rotted away, including this section of this whole panel. So I opted to make this out of a replacement piece, and this I got fabricated locally and replaced with marine grade alloy. And something as simple as the mud flaps, I wanted these to be time period with the old Land Rover logo. So this is from a surplus of the old Norwegian military when they used to have the SIII as a operation vehicle. I also have a sticker from a French company up here, but that's temporary because I will replace this with a reverse light, because this is already pre-drilled for that style of reverse light, which is also all stock from a military surplus. And since the last series I had was leaking a bunch of water inside of the car, all the galvanized cappings has been installed with a sealant in between the body and the part itself, which is normally used to seal rain gutters and stuff. And well, this car is not far off from being a rain gutter. And underneath here there's a lot of things which is not really on the list, such as new bump stops, one-way valve for this, which is being replaced for a raised breather eventually. New brackets to hold the brake lines. This middle one is temporary. And new braided soft lines between the chassis and the axle itself for the brake lines. New brackets for the exhaust. And all of the bolts has been replaced with stainless steel bolts or galvanized hot dipped bolts. And I could probably talk about every single thing on this car for hours, every small bolt, every decision I made during the restoration. But that's kind of the beauty of this, because when I have a breakdown down the line in the future, a month from now or 2 years from now, I will know exactly what I did and how to fix that. But right now there's one big thing missing from the build, and I should actually stop talking about the car now and pack, because I have to drive a couple of hours north to pick up the engine, or at least parts of the engine. Last week I delivered the block and top up there for those to be machined, but they're now finished with the major work, so I'm bringing the connecting rods for them to install new bushes and ream those. And I'm also bringing bearings for the camshaft to be installed in the block. So I'm also bringing the camshaft. And all of the engine parts has obviously been restored and brought back to life with the factory color, duck egg blue. It's an earlier engine, so this is supposed to be a bluer shade in comparison to the later duck egg blue, which is more green. And before I started working on the engine, it was still running on the original pistons with the original markings, and because of that the cylinders had a quite deep lip, and instead of trying to use the original pistons with bigger rings or trying to hone everything down, I decided to just get everything rebored for oversized pistons instead. So these are going in the bin and are being replaced with new oversized pistons from Turner Engineering. That's also where I bought all of the new valves, gaskets and everything else I need for the engine rebuild. So when I get back with the rest of the engine, I'm ready to do the bottom end of the engine with the crankshaft, the top of the engine, all new gaskets for everything, timing kit, bunch of assembly lube. Everything is ready to start. I just need to tidy up the workbench and do the full assembly. And just like that, there's an engine in the garage again. But it wasn't as easy as planned getting here, because after spending a couple of hours in the car driving up to the machine shop, they had done all of the work as planned, but then I also dropped off some more parts for them to do more work. Turns out they didn't have the tools for the camshaft bearings, but after a bunch of measuring, I also realized I didn't really need to replace them. It's one of those whilst you're in their jobs, but instead of buying a tool I'm never going to use again, I decided to just skip that job. But I also brought the connecting rods for them to press fit new bushes and ream those to size to fit the gliding pin on the new pistons. And they had also been nice enough to film a bunch of phone clips of the actual work getting done on the block and top. All in all, when I bought this, I drove the car from the west coast to the east coast before I even started to dismantle anything on the engine. So it probably could have lasted longer, or maybe not. And it would be somewhat of a shame having a car looking like this with an engine with a kind of uncertain future. And on the drive back to this garage, the car passed 100,000 miles, which means that this engine most likely has ran 100,025 miles. And it was running on stock pistons. It had original main bearings, it had original big end bearings and small end bushes on the connecting rods, but it was not running on the original copper head gasket, so there's been some work done to this in the past. But there hasn't been any machine work done to this before this job, which means I could actually use the first step of the oversized pistons, and that means in another 20 years I could rebore this and keep it alive for the next 20 years. I also got the head lapped, but this car was kind of taken out of service 20 years ago, so the car hasn't really been driving that much with unleaded fuel. Exhaust valves and the inlet valves has been replaced, but I haven't done anything with the seats apart from lapping those with a valve tool, and that will probably last a long time as it is. And it's not really a big deal taking the head off whilst the engine is in the car. So I wanted the block to be perfect, whilst this is easy to do something with in the future. And together with all of the new valves, I also replaced all of the valve seals or stem seals. 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. On the crankshaft, all of the bearings has been replaced and measured and bolted down. And as of now, I'm working very slowly on doing everything right, and just measuring, going back if I'm uncertain about something, and making sure that everything is done correctly, since this is the first time I'm doing something like this, and it's the first time I'm ever touching the internals of an engine. And as of now, I'm preparing the block for the flywheel, but I'm missing the bolts, or I have them somewhere, I'm just not sure where. I'm also trying my best to make the car somewhat leak-free, and at the rear end of the crank you have a kind of interesting oil seal, because between the cap and the block you have these rubber tees, and you need to squeeze these in together with the cap without ripping those apart. You also have a split style oil seal for the main shaft of the crank, which is supposed to go with the split towards the top, and then you have a small spring you need to tie around that, and then you have the last piece of the oil seal triangle, which is two rubber plates bolted on the outside, holding everything together with this resting up against a oil guard or something on the crank. So that is the rear main seal, which is the most common place for these to leak. There's even a drain hole on the flywheel housing for all of the oil to leak out of the flywheel housing instead of being kept in there. And there's also a plug you can plug in here if you're going to drive the car through deep water. Up front, on the other hand, there's just a single normal oil seal, which is supposed to go on the front cover. I can't really show you this because the camshaft is inside of the block, but it's consisting of uneven circles lifting this roller at a certain point, and on top of the roller you have this, which then again lifts this up and down, and when this is lifted up and down it lifts a connecting arm, which then lowers or lifts the exhaust or inlet valves. So all of these holes are filled with one of these, which is just the housing, and then this resting down on the camshaft. So this is actually just an extender because it's standing like this, lifting that lifting arm, and that goes through here when the head is installed the other way around on top of the block. When I was dismantling the car, I found a bunch of numbers and marks written down during the assembly of the car, and I really like seeing small parts of history like that. It's kind of like when you're refurbishing an old house. If you find a doodle from an old family living there 50 years ago, it doesn't serve any purpose, but it's nice seeing kind of a proof of someone else owning this or fixing this. So throughout the build now, I've written down a bunch of small hidden messages all over the car in random places, which is going to be discovered most likely by me doing more maintenance. But for example, inside of the flywheel housing, I've written down restored 2024 Norway by Casper Høglund. And I've also written down the mileage when I did the build. And I've done this in a bunch of different places because it would be kind of wholesome if I was, let's say, 75 years old and I got a message from someone doing the very same thing that I'm doing. Keeping it alive for another 50 years.
Just where it was needed. Clean the black as night. Cloistered in injustice. Dead in the eye of time. Nobody is losing. Faces merge and change, but your face remains the same. Sorrows will be here by dawn. When we're finally sober, they'll be gone. The trees will bloom and ice will melt. We'll always remember how it felt. A significant life, just what it was needed. Clean in the blackest night, cloistered in injustice dead. And in the eyes of time, nobody is losing. The sparrows will be here by dawn. When we finally sold